Being able to hit on the wide receiver position can make or break your chances at a championship, but don't worry because we have you covered in this video. We're going over breakouts, busts, sleepers, risky picks, players you should be targeting in every single round, my tiered rankings, top 24 wide receivers, along with the best overall approach at the position. I put hours of work and research into this video. All I'm asking is if you could please subscribe and like this video, and more importantly, I want to help you guys win your league. I want to build a connection with you guys, so please leave a comment or a question down below. I'd really appreciate it. All right, let's start with my breakout wide receivers, mainly because this is just the most fun category. If you can hit on a breakout guy, I don't care what the position is, your chance of winning it all increases drastically. My first guy that no doubt is going to break out this year, and that's Jackson Smith-Njigba. Like, this couldn't be more obvious. He's such an easy player to draft in fantasy because of his cost, which is insanely cheap, and his talent, along with his situation that drastically changed from last year. I mean, we won't spend too much time on it, but briefly, last season, if you remember, JSN fractured his wrist 4 weeks before the season started. And then once he finally got on the field, former offensive coordinator Shane Waldron just didn't know how to use him, turned him into this low ADOT player, which is not his game at all. On top of that, he was the third wide receiver on the depth chart behind DK and Lockett, and Seattle couldn't run a lot of 11 personnel because their offensive line got banged up so early that they needed to run 12 personnel to have 2 tight ends on the field to help block. So JSN was on the field sparingly, and then when he just wasn't utilized correctly. So it was just a disaster from the beginning, from coming off an injury, not getting on the field, and then when he did get on the field, not being utilized correctly, on top of Geno Smith being banged up. Like, it was horrible. Now, obviously, JSN flashed. We know his talent. Tyler Lockett's 32 years old. They spent a first-round pick on this guy. He should be the wide receiver 2 on the depth chart, and even if he's not, new offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb, coming over from Washington in college, ran a lot of 11 personnel. He is a very good offensive coordinator from everything that I have seen. So even if JSN somehow is still behind Lockett on the depth chart, they're going to run a lot of 11 personnel, a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, and talent is going to win out here. I think Seattle's offense is going to be explosive this season, and JSN is a crazy value in round 9, round 10, and you're getting him at his absolute floor where he could just explode. My second breakout, and this might be obvious to some, but it's Rashee Rice for me. From week 12 on last year, he was the wide receiver 9 in fantasy, averaging 7 receptions, 86 receiving yards, and 18.5 fantasy points per game. So if you look at his season as a whole, it wasn't that great, but that was mainly because Kansas City refused to put him in a full-time role until like the middle of the year, which was silly with MVS, Sky Moore, Justin Watson on the depth chart. Like, they had no one at wide receivers. You can argue there's more target competition, but Rashee Rice is a really good wide receiver on a really good offense. Could be the best offense in football this year, attached to Patrick Mahomes. Like, he's an easy bet to make in round 6, where you can draft him round 5, round 6. Rashee Rice is a crazy value on a really good Kansas City offense with some overrated pass catchers, a declining Travis Kelce, a rookie Xavier Worthy. I mean, if you think about it this way, like, Worthy and Hollywood Brown are going to help open up the field because they are deep threats, and then the middle of the field is going to should be very open for Rice and Kelce to do a lot of damage this year. And my third favorite breakout at wide receiver this year is none other than Christian Watson. Yes, I know, if you've been a previous Watson owner, it's been terribly frustrating, but I have some good news for you. If you want to go back to the well and draft Watson again, what Watson found was one quad was drastically smaller than the other in size, in muscle mass, but he's worked very hard this offseason to get his legs to be the same size. And the reason why that's important is because the leg that was smaller was overcompensating, and that's why he was pulling his hamstring all the time. But if that is fixed this year, then Watson has insane upside because we know the talent, the touchdown machine that he's been when he's on the field. Even from weeks 5 to 13 last year, when Watson hurt his hamstring in practice before the season started, when he was on the field last year, over that span, he led Green Bay in target share, air yard share, yards per route run, red zone targets, and first read share. Like, the talent has never been of question. 6'4", 4.3 speed. Like, he's a mismatch nightmare on a really good Green Bay offense with an ascending superstar in Jordan Love. Yes, you can argue that this wide receiver room is stacked, is crowded, but you're drafting Christian Watson in round 9, round 10. There's not a lot of risk at that spot. This is a player who has crazy upside if he hits. If Watson stays healthy, he has top 24, top 20 upside, even maybe higher than that at the position. That's how good he is. That's how good of a situation he's in. His only downfall has been getting injured, which is essentially resolved. Obviously, he could get hurt in a different way, right? But his nagging hamstrings, the problem has been they've found what the problem was. Like, if you told me that Watson was just entering the year again, they don't really know why he's hurting his hamstring, that's just what he does, then I would be out on him. But the fact that they found the root of the problem and Watson has worked very hard all offseason to fix it is extremely encouraging. And he's such a smash pick at this spot. It's a no-brainer. Next up, let's talk about some sleepers. We'll run through this one a little bit quicker because we do have 8 or so names to get through. Starting with Jalen Polk, the rookie wide receiver for New England. I think this is pretty simple. They don't have a lot of competition on that offense. They don't have a ton of talent on that offense. I think Drake May is a very good quarterback. I think he's going to get on the field early this year, and Polk, Javon Baker, Demario Douglas are going to be the top target. So this is a guy you can get towards the end of your draft, maybe with your last pick, that if he ends up leading this team in targets, that could be a player that gets hot towards the end of the year. This is a guy you take a swing on in a situation that could be much better this season than what we saw from New England last year with an upgraded coaching staff, upgrade at quarterback, and Polk is a really talented receiver. Next guy up, another Packer, Dontavian Wicks. I like Wicks. I like Watson, especially because you can get Wicks in round 15, 16 with one of the last picks of your draft. And if everything breaks right, Wicks has the talent, and if he gets the opportunity, he could really blow up. He reminds me so much of Devontae Adams. It's kind of scary. We know Wicks is a really good route runner. Similar stuff as we talked about with Watson, on a good offense with a good quarterback. These are guys you take shots on when you're just trying to find upside anywhere you can in the later rounds. I really like Wicks. Like, it wouldn't shock me if Dontavian is somehow the best wide receiver in Green Bay. Obviously, Watson is the most explosive, but Dontavian Wicks could be an absolute superstar, a possession type of guy. He's a good route runner. He has a very high ceiling with minimal to no risk. Next up is Xavier Legette from the Panthers. I mean, just look at this dude. He looks like A.J. Brown. He looks like DK Metcalf. He's a physical freak, 6'3", 230 pounds. He's fast. Like, this guy has future superstar written all over him. Now he's on an offense in Carolina that will be better this year. I think Bryce Young is a fine quarterback. I don't think he should have been the first overall pick, but I don't think he's a trash quarterback either. Now with Dave Canales at head coach, he's a quarterback whisperer. I think he's going to be huge for Bryce Young's development. And Xavier Legette is just betting on a physical freak, betting on a really talented player in a wide receiver room that has a lot of question marks. Like, I like Deontay Johnson. I think he's going to be a target monster. But Adam Thielen is old. Like, Xavier Legette could be this big play, downfield threat that Carolina desperately needs. He could be a touchdown machine. He could absolutely erupt this year. We always see rookies that we don't expect to just go berserk. I think a lot of people are down on this whole Carolina offense, but I think it could be really good this year, especially with Jonathan Brooks in the backfield once he gets healthy. So I have no problem taking a swing on Xavier. Next up is Khalil Shakir, kind of the opposite of Xavier Legette in terms of he's a smaller-ish wide receiver. I'm taking more of a bet on Shakir because it's a wide receiver room that we have so many question marks about. Who's going to emerge? Is it going to be Keon Coleman? Curtis Samuel is always hurt. I know Dalton Kincaid is a tight end, but he's probably going to lead this team in some receiving categories. I like Shakir because he's attached to Josh Allen. He's probably going to see a lot of targets. He already has built a chemistry, a rapport with Allen. Khalil did some nice things in Buffalo last year when given the opportunity. So he's a guy that could really pop that I don't think a lot of people are expecting. Another guy on this list is Brian Thomas Jr., who's already flashed in preseason. This guy could be really good. Like, we know what he did at LSU. absolutely erupted. He was a touchdown machine, deep ball threat. He reminds me of Christian Watson because he's a bigger receiver at 6'3", blazing speed, but he can also work the short, intermediate routes on another team that, like, they just lost Calvin Ridley. They need that deep ball, big play threat. Yes, they have Christian Kirk and Ingram, who tend to work more in the intermediate game. Trevor Lawrence has yet to just explode. I know he got that monster contract. I think this could be the year that this Jaguar offense takes the next step, and it would not shock me at all if Brian Thomas Jr. is a big part of it. Sorry, I forgot. Yes, they do have Gabe Davis, but that was like one of the worst signings all offseason. He's a very overrated receiver. I would not be surprised if Brian Thomas emerges in the second half of the season, their first round pick, extremely talented. Like, he's already better than Gabe Davis. I can say that with the utmost confidence. So another rookie that I really like to take a shot on if the price is right. Speaking of another Carolina Panther, Deontay Johnson. This is more the fact that DJ has been an elite target earner since entering the NFL. He hasn't had great quarterback play. He had Ben Roethlisberger, and then that's about it. Bryce Young might be the best quarterback of his career on a Carolina team that's going to be trailing in most games. They're going to throw a ton. Deontay Johnson, if you're in a PPR league, is a smash pick. He could have 100 receptions this year. Maybe he doesn't have those double-digit touchdowns, but a guy who has 100-plus catches in a PPR league is an absolute steal. Where he's going at ADP in round 9, 10 in drafts. And then lastly, Ladd McConkey, another rookie. And McConkey is simple to me because the Chargers have no one on offense. They have no one in the passing game. Quentin Johnson looks like a bust. Their running backs, none of them are really standing out. And he's attached to Justin Herbert on another team that's probably going to be playing behind. I don't think the Chargers have a very good defense. McConkey is another PPR monster. Yes, Ladd doesn't have like this impressive collegiate career statistically, but if you look at the advanced metrics, he's a really talented route runner. He's got that burst and speed that you're looking for. He's got that endless motor. He reminds me a lot of Cooper Kupp. Like, I love Ladd. I think he's going to be really good in year one for a team that really needs him. On to the bust category. This might ruffle some feathers. We talked about a lot of these guys in depth on my last video, but we got to do it again because this is the wide receiver vault. This is where we attack everything about the position. And my first bust is Davante Adams. Last year was the first season since 2015 that Adams didn't finish as a top 12 fantasy receiver. His yards per target, yards per route run were his worst marks since 2017. And a lot of it doesn't have to deal with Adams at all. It's the poor quarterback play. It's the inefficient passes. The problem here is that he has to deal with that again. It's not like Vegas got Michael Penix Jr., right? And they have this huge quarterback upgrade. I would be in on Adams if that was the case. But nope, they have Aiden O'Connell again and Gardner Minshew, two average to probably more below average quarterbacks in the league. So it's just not really appealing. Like, Adams saw 175 targets last year, which was second in the NFL, only behind CeeDee Lamb. And he still finished as the wide receiver 15 in fantasy points per game. So, like, how much better can it get this year? How much do we think these passes from Minshew or O'Connell are going to be more accurate this season? I'm betting that they're not. Yes, he's going to see a lot of targets again, but, like, the efficiency won't be there. He went over 100 yards only 3 times last season, and in 2 of those 3 games, it required 20-plus targets to get there. Like, it's just, I'm completely out on Adams. His offense is going to be poor. They're going to be run heavy. They're not going to sustain drives. They're not going to be in scoring position often. He's one of the worst picks in round 2. It's just, that's what it is. My second guy, another big name player that's getting older, and that's Mike Evans, who he's a Hall of Fame wide receiver. He's won over 1,000 receiving yards every single year since he's been in the league. He was an absolute steal in drafts last year because you got him in round 6, round 7, because everyone was like, oh, Baker Mayfield is awful. Like, he just had Tom Brady, and now we have to deal with Mayfield. Like, he surprised a lot of people. The issue this year is you have to pay up if you want Evans this season. He's a round 3 pick, entering his age 31 season with their brilliant play caller and Dave Canale's gone. New offense, new system. Like, he's going to regress in the TD department as he led the NFL last year with 13. He scored 13 of Tampa Bay's 28 receiving touchdowns last season. Like, he scored it at such an insane level. That's going to come back down to earth. You're putting a lot of faith in Baker Mayfield. You don't really know what this offense is going to look like with Liam Cohen. I think Godwin gets an uptick now that he's going to be moving back into the slot full time. Like, I just don't like betting on older players in new situations with Baker Mayfield as their quarterback. I don't care how good Mayfield played last year. He played way above his pay grade, or not his pay grade, but he played a lot better than we know he really is, and that's just something I don't want to gamble on this year when the play caller that elevated this whole offense is gone. I don't think Tampa Bay's offense is going to be nearly as good, so Evans is just way too risky at that cost when there's way better options with less risk. Continuing on with the theme, Stephon Diggs. We'll try to whip through these a little bit quicker. Stephon Diggs is another guy who I think is one of the worst picks in all of fantasy drafts. Older receiver, couldn't get it done the back half of last year and the year before that with Buffalo. Clear-cut number one target with Josh Allen as your quarterback. Now he enters a worse situation in terms of target competition with Nico, Tank Dell. Joe Mixon will earn some targets out of the backfield. Yes, he goes from one elite quarterback to another in CJ Stroud, but I just don't think a round 3 pick is warranted for a receiver who's already showed us that he's on the decline with a ton of target competition. Like, it's just an easy fade for me at cost. Fourth guy, Malik Neighbors. Love the player, hate the situation. Neighbors is probably going to be the next Jamar Chase. Like, these LSU wide receivers are just built different. This has nothing to do with Neighbors. It more has to deal with the environment that he's in and the quarterback that he has. Starting with the situation, like, I just don't think the Giants offense is going to be very good. They're not going to have a run game. They're not going to sustain drives. They don't have many weapons, if any, outside of Neighbors on offense. So that's a negative. And then Daniel Jones is such a bad quarterback. Like, he is yet to reach 7 yards per pass attempt in his first 5 seasons in the NFL. He's never thrown for more than 3,300 yards. In 6 games last year, 6 interceptions, 2 touchdown passes. This is a Drake London, Desmond Ridder situation last year. Like, everyone's like, oh, London's going to blow up. And then he was just dragged down by terrible coaching and poor quarterback play. I just think that's what we see with Neighbors this year. I don't want to spend a 4th round pick on a guy who's going to give you boom games, but he's also going to give you a lot of bust games. Last guy in this category, another big name receiver in a new situation that's getting older, and that's Keenan Allen, 32 years old, now in Chicago with a rookie quarterback with a ton of target competition that he didn't have in LA with Justin Herbert. On top of that, he's very injury prone the last 2 years. He hasn't been able to finish the season. I would just rather draft a guy like Rashee Rice, who's going around the same range, who doesn't have those risks and just has much more potential to grow and upside. All right, now on to the best part that everyone loves, and that's the rankings. Let's go through it. We have the graphic here. Starting at number 1 with CeeDee Lamb. This one's pretty simple, right? If Jerry Jones just needs to retire or let someone else handle his job because he's just awful, give Lamb his money. He's one of the best wide receivers in the game. I believe they're going to come to an agreement soon, but it is kind of nerve-wracking if you're drafting tomorrow or the day after. It's nerve-wracking drafting knowing he hasn't signed yet, but I feel like you just have to trust that he's going to get it done. He's going to get out there. And he's just in such a good situation with literally no target competition in Dallas. He's just in a really good spot. He's in the prime of his career. Number 2 for me is Tyreek Hill. If you want to put Tyreek Hill at 1 first, sure, go for it. The only downside with Hill is that he's 30. And while he hasn't showed signs of declining last year, that doesn't mean he's not going to decline this year. And the more concerning part with being 30 years old is that injuries become more common and it's harder to heal as quick as if you were 23 years old. So there's a little bit of risk in Tyreek Hill, but obviously if he's on the field, he's healthy, he is unguardable. A third guy, another contract dispute, even though Jamar has 2 years left on his contract. I think he's just waiting for Lamb to sign, and then he's probably going to sign. But Jamar's just another guy that's had unfortunate injury luck, or Burrow's had unfortunate injury luck. I think this is the year these two stay healthy and just break the league. Like we saw what Chase did his rookie year, 1,400 yards, 13 touchdowns with Burrow. If these guys stay healthy, I would not be surprised if Chase is the best player in fantasy this year. Obviously, Jamar does carry some risk, but his outcome, his potential, might be the highest in this entire list. At number 4, if you want to talk about safe, if you want to talk about consistent, if you want to talk about just a dominant player in a good spot, that's Amon-Ra St. Brown. If you don't want to deal with the contract situation with Jamar, I have no problem taking Amon-Ra St. Brown 3. Just understand his situation. Like, I don't think he has the ceiling that Chase does. I'll say this. I don't think St. Brown has the touchdown ceiling that Chase does, just because of the offense that Detroit's in with Laporta and Gibbs, and if Jameson Williams has a breakout year, and Jared Goff, like, not as good of a quarterback as Joe Burrow. Cincinnati, it's just really Higgins and Chase. We don't really know what their running back room is going to look like, and Burrow is just a much better quarterback than Goff, so I like Chase as an upside play, but if you want consistent, reliable, go St. Brown. All right, fifth wide receiver. Maybe we'll pick this up a little bit for you guys. Fifth wide receiver, I have is Justin Jefferson. I'll say this. We could look back on this year and be like, what were we thinking? Like, Justin Jefferson could be the consensus 101 next year, and I wouldn't be surprised. Yes, Sam Darnold has proven just to not be a good quarterback his entire career, but I would argue that this is the best situation Darnold's in a good Minnesota system with Kevin O'Connell, and this is the best wide receiver that Darnold has ever had. I know I always talk about elite wide receivers can't make bad quarterbacks better, but this situation might be an exception to the rule. I wouldn't say Darnold is one of the worst quarterbacks in the league, but he's definitely not one of the best. And it just might be a case of Justin Jefferson is just that good. Yes, you can make the argument what he did with Nick Mullins last year. We'll actually go into that in the next category. We'll talk more about that, but I have JJ here right now. We could be kicking ourselves, or we could be like, man, I wish I would have not drafted Jefferson because Sam Darnold is just a disaster. If JJ McCarthy was not out for the year, I'd be more comfortable drafting Jefferson, but now you don't even have that upside rookie quarterback just waiting in the backfield to become the starter. It's just Darnold or nothing, or Mullins. Like, that's just not exciting. It just feels a little bit risky. At number 6 for me is AJ Brown, who, listen, last year to close out the year was a disaster, but I blame a lot of that on the whole team was a mess. The coaching was a mess. The offensive scheme was a mess. I think Kellen Moore is going to revamp this offense. I think AJ Brown is going to be Kellen Moore's Keenan Allen, or Kellen Moore when he was in Dallas's CeeDee Lamb. I think he's going to feature AJ Brown. He's got an insane rapport with Jalen Hurts. Like, it wouldn't shock me if AJB is the wide receiver 1 overall this year. That's how big of a season I think he's going to have. That's how just talented he's well in his prime. He's a freak of nature. Love AJ Brown this year. The wide receiver 7 for me, which is Garrett Wilson. This is the year he explodes. Healthy Aaron Rodgers. Wilson is going to show you guys that he's one of the best wide receivers in the game. I love taking Wilson. Even if you had him last year and he burned you, it was because of the situation. Go back to the well and draft Garrett with confidence. All right, on to my wide receiver 8, and that's Drake London. Another guy coming off a rough year that we thought was going to explode, but was held back by poor coaching and poor quarterback play. Now he gets the total opposite with strong, promising coaches and Kirk Cousins. Feels risky, but bet on talent and situation, and thank me later. My wide receiver 9 would be Marvin Harrison Jr. The talent, the volume that he's going to see with a healthy Kyler Murray. The upside is tremendous. Yes, there's a little bit of risk when taking a rookie at any position, but I love Marvin Harrison Jr. this year, and don't be afraid to draft him. So Nico Collins would be at 10 for me. I'm not worried about Stephon Diggs coming into town. I think Nico is just a physical freak on a good offense attached to CJ Stroud. And while I like Tank Dell in round 5, I have no problem being aggressive getting Nico on my team. At number 11, that's Puka Nacua. I'm a little discouraged that he is hurt currently with the knee injury, and a healthy Cooper Kupp and a Kyron Williams. Like, they just might not rely as much on Puka this year. Like, when Kupp and Nacua were on the field together, they were averaging similar target share, similar receptions per game, fantasy points. So you're kind of drafting him at his ceiling in round 2, I believe. It's better than what he was. He was a round 1 pick, and I was completely out at that cost. I'm fine taking him in round 2. He's a second-year player. We haven't seen what this Rams offense is going to look like with a fully healthy Kyron and Kupp. So I would just rather pivot and go a different receiver and take the value on Kupp in round 4, round 5. To my wide receiver 12, and that is Jalen Waddle. I just think Waddle is one of the best values in all of drafts this year, coming off career low in touchdowns. He had unfortunate injuries where he was leaving the game and coming back in. Tyreek Hill's 30 years old. I think Waddle is only going to be better this year in a good ecosystem in Miami. Easy bet to make. To my wide receiver 13, and that is Chris Olave. I love Chris Olave as a player. I'm really excited to see what this Saints offense looks like with Clint Kubiak. I'm just not sold on Derek Carr. I know Olave and Carr really looked good at the end of last year, but can Carr put a full season together? I'm not sure. So I don't like drafting wide receivers who are on questionable offenses with questionable quarterbacks early on in my draft. I'm fine taking guys in that situation in round 6, 7, the later rounds, but with a round 2, round 3 pick, I prefer not to take Olave just because I am worried about what this offense is going to look like and Derek Carr. To my wide receiver 14, DK Metcalf. I'm excited about DK. I think he's going to be a wide receiver 1. I think he has top 8 upside at the position. Finally has Pete Carroll gone. This offense has been a mess. I feel like every year that DK's been here, the scheme, the play calling has just been horrible. I love Ryan Grubb. We've already seen them in the preseason. I think the Seattle offense is going to be really, really good, and DK is going to be a huge part of it. At number 15, I couldn't really put Devontae any farther down, even though I am fading him at cost. We know the talent Adam still has. It's just the quarterback play and the offense that he's on, I'm just not a fan of. At number 16, the Ram wide receiver that I prefer to draft is Cooper Kupp. I mean, it's kind of going against everything that I've talked about. I don't love older wide receivers who've been injured the last couple of years. I kind of make an exception for Kupp just because of the value that he is in round 4 and the connection that he has with Matt Stafford. If Devontae Adams still had Aaron Rodgers, I'd be all in on Devontae, right? Kupp has Stafford. We know the connection they have. Kupp was a Triple Crown winner a couple years ago. Their chemistry they have is insane. It's a really friendly scheme for wide receivers with Sean McVay in LA. So those things are encouraging. Connection he has with Stafford, the system that he's in, and the value that you're getting him at, I have no problem taking Kupp in round 4. I probably wouldn't take him any earlier than that, though. My wide receiver 17, Deebo Samuel. Listen, if Brandon Ayuk gets traded, Deebo is vaulting up this list. But until that happens, whenever that happens, if Ayuk is a 49er, this is where I have Deebo. Yes, I love Deebo. Yes, he's coming off a really good year. I believe he was wide receiver 12 in fantasy points per game. It's because he scored 5 rushing touchdowns. You can't really bank on the rushing production. He's a player that just doesn't get a ton of work on a crowded San Francisco offense, and you have to live with the inconsistencies and the potential injuries with Deebo. So he can be a little bit risky, but like I said, I love him if there's no Ayuk in San Francisco anymore. Rashee Rice would be my wide receiver 18. I really like Rice this year. We already touched on him. He is going to have a big season with Patrick Mahomes. No question. To my wide receiver 19, and that's Devontae Smith. I do like Smith in this Kellen Moore offense. He plays second fiddle, most likely to A.J. Brown. You have Saquon there now. A little bit more crowded of an offense, but if you want a consistent guy who might not blow the lid off every single week, but is going to have good production, look no farther than Devontae Smith. To my wide receiver 20, and that is Michael Pittman. I like Michael Pittman. He's going to be a big part of this Colts offense. I don't know about his touchdown upside. He hasn't really been a big touchdown guy. He's going to be the possession receiver. It's a new offense now, right, with Anthony Richardson. It's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. Little worried about Richardson as a passer. I think he's going to have some games where he does struggle, but I think Pittman is still a rock-solid wide receiver too. To wide receiver 21, that's DJ Moore. I'm not super worried about Keenan Allen. Yes, this wide receiver room is crowded with Allen and Odunze, something that DJ didn't have to deal with last year. Rookie quarterback, but I think it's going to be a better offense with better quarterback play. I have no problem taking DJ Moore at cost. I think he's a very reliable pick where he's being drafted. I think he has another strong year. At wide receiver 22, it's Brandon Ayuk. More so just because we don't know what's going on. If Ayuk goes to Washington, he is flying up this ranking. If he goes to Pittsburgh, he's probably dropping. And if he goes to San Francisco, I think he's a rock solid wide receiver too wherever he goes. But if he goes to Washington with Jaden Daniels, I think he could be a top 12 fantasy receiver this year. I mean, Jaden Daniels, their former teammates, doesn't have a ton of target competition there either. I like the scheme with Cliff Kingsbury. Yes, McLaurin is there, but I think Ayuk and McLaurin would complement each other well. It'd be a really good situation. To my wide receiver 23, and that's Tank Dell. Listen, I am all in on Tank this year. maybe I have him too low. I do like Tank Dell. I think this is going to be the Nico Tank show this season. You always like to draft a young wide receiver in a good ecosystem attached to an elite quarterback. I have no problem drafting Dell a little bit higher. And lastly, my wide receiver 24, Zay Flowers. I do really like Zay this year. There's just so many good receivers, right? But Flowers is the wide receiver 1 on a really good Baltimore offense that is starting to throw more under Todd Monken. Doesn't have a ton of competition. I don't think Bateman is going to be anything this year. OBJ is gone. The passing game is going to run through Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers. Flowers popped at times. His rookie season, he reminds me a lot of Steve Smith, that smaller, explosive guy who it would not shock me if he erupts this year. All right, chugging right along now to some guys who I have ranked highly, but I just want to talk about some of the risk that they bring. They just feel a little bit risky when you draft them. I'm not telling you not to draft them. I just want you to understand everything involved with them and some of the potential risk that they have. Starting off first, and it's Justin Jefferson. I know I talked about this could go one of two ways. Either we're like kicking ourselves in the head because JJ is just the best fantasy receiver in all of football this year. Would not shock anyone, right? Or Sam Darnold is just a train wreck of a quarterback and he drastically pulls Jefferson down. Both things are possible. I'd feel a lot better, I talked about this earlier, if McCarthy wasn't out for the year because I like the upside of a rookie quarterback that I think is really good. But everyone's like, oh, he got it done with Nick Mullins weeks 15 to 18 last year. He did and he didn't, because in 2 of those games were against Detroit where JJ just erupted, and Detroit secondary we know last year was one of the worst in football. Week 16, he had 6 for 141 and a touchdown. Week 18 against Detroit, 12 for 192 and a score. So over that final stretch, yes, he averaged 22 fantasy points per game, but it's kind of inflated because of how he just crushed a really bad secondary. So it doesn't really give us, or at least it doesn't give me a lot of confidence, because in those other 2 games, he went 7 for 84, which is fine, but it's not warranted for a top 6 pick ideally. And then he went 5 for 59. So if we see a lot of those 5 for 59 games this year with Sam Darnold, then we're going to be like, shoot, we should not have taken JJ with a top 5-6 pick. So just understand that with Jefferson, obviously he's in a good system with Kevin O'Connell. They're going to find creative ways to get him the football. Maybe Sam Darnold is going to have a Geno Smith, just like all of a sudden he figures it out. Like, this is probably the best ecosystem Darnold's been in, with obviously the best wide receiver he's ever thrown the football to. So it is possible that Darnold is better than we think. He just hasn't shown us that yet. We'll breeze past these a little bit quicker. I have Puka on here just because of, if you have a healthy Cooper Kupp all season, I don't think Puka is going to have that dominant of a year. Devontae Adams, who we already talked about. Chris Olave, who we talked about. Brandon Ayuk, just because we don't know where he's going. Cooper Kupp still has some risks just because he's older and he's been injured often. And then George Pickens, I know this is a breakout candidate for a lot of people. I'm just very concerned with an Arthur Smith offense and with 2 really bad quarterbacks at this point with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. I think Pickens has those blow-up games. I just don't think he's this consistent contributor, this wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1 week type of guy. I think he's just going to be very boomer bust, very frustrating to have on your team. Moving on to just, these are my top targets at wide receiver. If you can get at least 1 or 2 of these guys, you will be in a really good spot at the position. These guys that I love drafting are Rashee Rice, A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle, DK Metcalf, Tank Dell, Christian Watson, and Jackson Smith-Njigba. Some of my favorite guys to draft at cost at the wide receiver position. We're going to breeze past this next part as well, so keep up. These are the best wide receiver picks in every single round. Round 1 is A.J. Brown and Garrett Wilson, just because of the value you can get them at and the potential return that they can give you. Both guys can be wide receiver 1 overall this year. Round 2, Drake London and Marvin Harrison Jr. Round 3, Nico Collins and Jalen Waddle. Round 4, DK Metcalf and Cooper Kupp. Round 5, Tank Dell and Zay Flowers and Devontae Smith. Round 6, I love taking Rashee Rice. Round 7, Calvin Ridley, who I think Will Levis is better than we think. Calvin Ridley just got a lot of money, and DeAndre Hopkins is hurt and injured. Ridley is going to see a ton of work. I think he has a fantastic year. I also like Rome Odunze in round 7. Round 8, Deontay Johnson, Lad McConkey, who we've talked about. Round 9, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Christian Watson, and Brian Thomas Jr. In round 10, I don't love anyone going in round 10 at cost unless someone falls to you. I prefer to start taking shots at running backs who, if their situation breaks right, could be league winners, and that's Brian Robinson Jr. for me, Tajay Spears, and Trey Benson. All right, and lastly is the best overall approach that I've found for the position. Obviously, this is going to vary on your league format, your roster spots, what platform you're drafting on. So this might not be applicable exactly to your situation, but it can be a general guideline. I like to focus on, at least through the first 3 rounds, to come away with 2 elite wide receivers if possible. I don't like to go running back heavy through the first 3 rounds just because wide receivers offer less variance and less risk. Like in round 1, I really like to just get my elite hero running back, give me a Breece Hall, give me a Bijan Robinson, even a Jahmyr Gibbs, and then just hammer wide receiver in rounds 2 and rounds 3. And those wide receivers that I love to target in rounds 2, 3, Marvin Harrison Jr., Nico Collins, Drake London, Jalen Waddle. And then in round 4, you have 1 running back and 2 wide receivers ideally. Then go get Trey McBride, or I have no problem taking CJ Stroud. If you want to wait on tight end and quarterback, then just keep going wide receivers. Don't reach in round 4, round 5 for these running backs that aren't very good. And also because rounds 4 and 5 are such a wide receiver goldmine, continue to hit those values. Get DK Metcalf, Devontae Smith, Tank Dell, Cooper Kupp, Zay Flowers. Don't reach on a running back that you don't even know how they're going to perform this year based on their situation. Attack the wide receiver position. Be aggressive, starting your team with as many wide receivers as you can. I promise you that's the smartest strategy, especially if you're in a PPR, half PPR league. And then don't stop drafting wide receivers after you solidified your quarterback and tight end. However you want to do it, continue to chase high upside wide receivers, who I think is Rashee Rice, Rome Odunze, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Christian Watson, guys we've already talked about. Don't stop chasing high upside, young, talented wide receivers in really good situations. It's going to pay off. That was a full video. I appreciate you guys if you made it all the way through. But please remember, if you got anything from the video, I'd really appreciate if you liked the video and subscribed as well. Leave a comment down below. I want to help you guys win your league more than anything. That's all we got. We will see you in the next one.